Consider the following statement. A vegan animal rights advocate was bullied into suicide after a failed painting career. A popular misconception is that all one needs to be an honest purveyor of the truth is to stick to the facts. But within an event are near infinite facts one could present. Constructing a story out of those facts requires not only the inclusion of relevant information, but the omission of irrelevant information. The decision of what facts to include or omit on the part of the storyteller is called framing. A story needs framing to make it engaging to an audience. Dispassionate readings of police reports do not garner hundreds of thousands of subscribers. If you want to hold the attention of today's public, you must passionately speculate on the underlying reasons and motivations of what will be characters in your story. And to get them to like and subscribe, those reasons and motivations need to fit into a narrative your audience wants to hear. Facts and context must take a backseat to framing when you have a narrative to sell. This is especially true when one encounters facts that would potentially harm the emotional impact of the story. When this happens, it's often in the best interest of your role as a storyteller to simply omit them. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the hellscape of YouTube politics, and in particular, anti-social justice YouTube. With the crux of their positions amounting to being against social justice warriors rather than rooted in underlying principles, a certain roster of YouTubers have reached the apex of reactionary rhetoric. When the enemy of my enemy is a white supremacist, reframe the narrative to make them my friend. The recent ban of Black Pigeon Speaks and the subsequent reinstatement of his channel caused me to ponder the nature of framing. Black Pigeon Speaks is a lot of things. He's dabbled in Holocaust denial, tried to tie race and IQ together, called black people dindus, said that women enjoy rape, and is a plagiarist. If you had to describe a person with these views, undoubtedly the description would be that he's a white nationalist, as these are all key talking points of white nationalist politics. The Holocaust denial, the race realism, the misogyny, the anti-immigration and nationalist zeal he displays could be a page taken from Oswald Mosley. Add some Islamic nasheed music to his videos, and it could plausibly pass for ISIS propaganda. However, if you take all of this information and describe him merely as an anti-communist, as Sargon did, you'd be selectively framing him in a more flattering light, when the whole truth is much less flattering. Describing the mess of dishonesty, conspiracy, and racism that Black Pigeon Speaks is as an alternative media creator is akin to describing John Wayne Gacy as a children's entertainer. While technically true, the framing leaves out crucial information one would require to have an accurate perception. In response to Kraut's analysis video of Black Pigeon Speaks, a video critically deconstructing his propagandistic style, Sargon chastised Kraut on a public stream, declaring that criticizing Black Pigeon Speaks is not speaking truth to power, as if there was some obligation not to hurt the feelings of white nationalists. I thought my own video on Sargon more or less made the point clearly, but in case that's fallen on deaf ears, I'll say it again here. Pigeon is a liar, a racist, and a plagiarist. He is not above criticism. When Sargon declares in this video that there was no basis for which to ban Black Pigeon Speaks because he never committed hate speech, he either wasn't paying attention or is deliberately obfuscating Pigeon's intentions for the greater good of the anti-social justice narrative.
This is the face of a human, equal in all ways to all other humans and a blessing to any multicultural society. This is also the face of a human, equal in all ways to other humans and a blessing to any multicultural society. Just to get this out of the way, because I have a feeling it might show up in the comments, yes, I am aware that the vast majority of women, when raped, reach sexual climax or orgasm.
I like them very much. They're my friends. Very different from these kinds of people, that is.
By allowing women to fuck freely, the West has de facto entered a matriarchy that disincentivizes young men.
A Nazi is anyone that disagrees with any aspect of the current World War II Foundation myth. The only real value, topic, or event that is held as sacrosanct and cannot be mocked, joked about, or even questioned on pain of imprisonment in many countries in Europe is the Holocaust. Throughout the Western world in its entirety, to question even the details of the Holocaust is to have yourself shunned by society and made a social pariah.
His misogyny and racism were on constant apparent display. He has earned the backlash he has received. The lavish hospitality offered to Pigeon by Sargon, then, is not born out of a principled stance on free speech, but rather the Mott and Bailey of a useful idiot for fascism. For another perfect example of an anti-social justice YouTuber who understands how to perfectly distort the framing of conversations to better suit his own narrative, look no further than Some Black Guy. In recounting the events of Destiny's debate with JonTron, Some Black Guy condemns Destiny for using debate tricks to corner JonTron into advocating for ethno-nationalism, a position JonTron clearly held prior to ever coming into that debate, as evidenced by his tweets. JonTron made references to gene pool integration, white demographic decline, and black criminality in an immigration debate that shouldn't need to reference any of those unless you want to frame the debate as one of white preservation versus barbarian hordes. If JonTron wasn't advocating for ethno-nationalism, why then would he ever need to talk of gene pools? If he were speaking of culture, why would whites becoming a demographic minority matter? Some Black Guy never explores this, instead opting only to make a sweeping declaration that Destiny was somehow the bad guy. In a conversation about forming ethnostates, he focuses his criticisms toward attacking Destiny, who is arguing against them, and praising JonTron, who is arguing for them. He makes complaints in this video that fact-checking somebody is a debate trick. He complains that Destiny just wanted to stay on topic. In another video, Some Black Guy berates Francesca Ramsey for proclaiming voter ID laws constituted a racial injustice. In Ramsey's video, she explains that the majority of people lacking photo IDs are minority and elderly, that voter fraud is rarer than lightning strikes, and that Republican precinct chairs have openly displayed racial animosity when talking about the harmful effects of voter ID laws. And to all that, Some Black Guy only had smug dismissal. A North Carolina voter ID law was struck down after having been found to have been enacted with racially discriminatory intent, singling out IDs most used by black people and excluding them. The General Assembly requested data broken down specifically based on race before enacting the law, and could offer no justification for doing so. Similarly, the Voting Rights Act preclearance formula was eliminated in Shelby County v. Holder, which Francesca Ramsey referenced in her video. Had Some Black Guy bothered to do the most basic research and look up what she was talking about, he'd have come across this snippet from Wikipedia. 3 years after the ruling, 868 polling places had been closed down. 5 years after the ruling, nearly 1,000 polling places had been closed in the country, with many of the closed polling places in predominantly African American counties, and reduction in voting locations can reduce voter turnout. A 2018 report by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, a bipartisan independent commission of the United States federal government, found that there had been a growth in discriminatory laws making it harder for minorities to vote. The commission found that at least 23 states enacted restrictive voter laws, such as closures of polling places, cuts to early voting, purges of voter rolls, and imposition of strict voter ID laws. The commission chair said people continue to suffer significant and profoundly unequal limitations on their ability to vote. That stark reality denigrates our democracy and diminishes our ideals. This level of ongoing discrimination confirms what was true before 1965 when the Voting Rights Act became law, and has remained true since 1965. Americans need strong and effective federal protections to guarantee that ours is a real democracy. Of course, none of this was mentioned, except by Francesca Ramsey. Some Black Guy had no interest in what was true, only an interest in framing the issue as one of sensitive social justice advocates proclaiming everything as racist. In his video, he acts exacerbated and inconvenienced. He repeatedly describes her as, quote, retarded. But over the course of its runtime, he fails to respond to even a single point made by Ramsey. Instead, he gave cover to racism in order to protect the narrative. A crypto-fascist lives on the plausible deniability of their stated motives. I'm not a racist, declares the crypto. I'm just interested in the preservation of Western civilization. It just so happens that the goals ultimately end up lining together. The formation of an ethnically homogenous state. Disguise the language and you disguise the motives. Lauren Southern knows this full well. You will never find Southern saying anything overtly racist, but she will repeatedly promote overt racists, declaring them interesting, interviewing them uncritically, and even spreading their propaganda. Her video on the Great Replacement is the perfect example of just this. Anybody observant in the most minimally invasive way would see this theory for what it is: white genocide propaganda. And thus, she opens this video stating that, in fact, it's very data intensive, as if to declare that simply reading numbers can carry with it no racial motive. The Great Replacement is the driving force behind Generation Identity and Identity Europa's political activity. The idea that they're being replaced is used as a call to action. And of course, when someone who believes in this conspiracy takes this idea to its obvious conclusion and massacres Muslims, it only becomes appropriate to declare those responsible for its spread a share of the responsibility for its damage. The messengers of violent ideas are responsible for the violence perpetrated based on those ideas. Not every fascist philosopher personally killed people. Nonetheless, we lay the graveyard fascism left behind at their feet. Lauren Southern has blood on her hands. Her documentary Farmlands proposes a narrative that whites are under attack in South Africa, victims of an impending genocide. No scrutiny is placed by Southern on the matter, and the narrative is expertly crafted to the service of the documentary's primary financial benefactors, the Soylanders. Simon Roche, a white nationalist proxy for the Soylanders, is even kind enough to make an appearance in the work. Of course, no scrutiny would be placed on who these people are. For some context, Roche himself was hosted and interviewed by identitarian platforms ranging from Red Ice TV, League of the South, Freedomain Radio, and American Renaissance. Jared Taylor's platform is doubly impressive, given that Roche was keynote speaker at their 2017 conference. Roche also has financial ties to Identity Europa, an organization which has granted both political and financial favor to the Soylanders. I want to take a second to compare and contrast the style of journalism which separates Lauren Southern from an actual journalist, Emma Cott of the New York Times. Identity Europa's previous head, Eli Mosley, who helped organize the now infamous Unite the Right rally, was found to have lied about his military service in Iraq, claiming to be a veteran of a foreign war when in fact, he never even deployed. Emma Cott combed through military service records to make this discovery, and then confronted Eli on his lie, to which he wavered to claiming he was in Kuwait, and it's kind of the same thing. In addition to these basic checks, Cott uncovered Eli Mosley, at the time the head of Identity Europa, to have gone onto white nationalist podcasts, where he announced this to the world.
I work in HR, firing all day. Before that, I was in the army and I got to kill Muslims for fun. I'm not sure which one was better. Watching cry, they can't feed their little children, or watching Muslims' brains sprayed on the wall. Honestly, both probably suck compared to listening to a scream while being up it.
Now to Southern. Soylanders' primary benefactors are white nationalist groups. Their spokesperson is keynote speaker to white nationalist conferences hosted by Jared Taylor. Their spokesperson has a personal relationship with one of the organizers of a white nationalist rally where a woman was murdered, and ties to a man who proclaimed that he derived pleasure from taking jobs away from non-whites. Southern did not inquire about any of this, because to do so would change the framing of her narrative. Lauren Southern does this a lot, capitulates to an audience by combating or framing narratives in a bad faith way. Her book, which was clearly not ghostwritten, is transparently composed of the same style of bad faith argumentation. The humor is a page straight out of 2016 YouTube comment sections, with some of the same repetitious themes throughout. Social justice is bad. White people are victims. Western civilization is under attack. Much like her approach to shock jockey journalism, her book is riddled with the same lazy gotchas we witnessed earlier. One chapter remarks that social justice advocates are akin to stormtroopers. Another remarks that academia is a brainwashing institution designed to upset whites. Her book does reveal something interesting, as best noted by YouTuber Jose Not J.
Towards the end, Southern offers 4 recommendations on how to save the West, and they are building border walls, an immigration policy based on merit and national origin, protecting free speech, and making people ashamed for needing welfare. The welfare one is just a really shitty thing to do, but I want to focus in on the national origin part of the second point. Although Southern claims not to be a racist, points like this make me pause. She also writes this: immigration policy in the West simply fails to be remotely meritocratic. Immigrants are not let in to fill niches where our countries need help or to contribute in some way to society. It's even considered controversial in some circles to suggest that immigrants should be able to pull their own weight. All of this must be reversed. In the US, a good start would be repealing the Immigration Act of 1965 so that things like national origin can be factored into our calculus, and so that the limits of immigration from other Western countries can be removed. Everywhere else, the same sort of measures must be taken. The first thing you'll notice is that no sources are cited for any of this. While Southern does on occasion provide them, I counted 33 sources out of 48 footnotes provided. A cursory look at any Western nation's immigration process will show you the hoops a foreign national has to jump through in order to immigrate. It often involves interviews, providing documentation for skills, and other requirements that demonstrate merit. And Lauren Southern completely contradicts herself when she talks about how national origin should be factored into the calculation. She isn't even subtle about when she says limits on Western countries should be removed. She wants immigrants not coming from Western nations to be subject to greater selection pressures. If potential immigrants are being chosen based on their merit, what does their nationality have to do with that? If two doctors are applying to immigrate to Canada, one from Norway and the other from Pakistan, and all things about them otherwise are equal, why would Lauren Southern want to turn away the doctor from Pakistan? Or at least, why does that Pakistani doctor have to face restrictions that the Norwegian one wouldn't?
This video does a far more thorough job documenting Southern's long history of dishonesty than I ever could, and I absolutely encourage everyone to go watch it. Jose is absolutely worth the time investment. At one point, these people may have had legitimate, noble intentions of examining issues with the nuance and integrity that was supposedly lacking in the corner of the internet they claim to stand against. That's certainly how they build themselves. At some point, however, the anti-social justice community realized that facts don't get you the money and subscribers that a good narrative does. By the nature of what links them together, the anti-social justice crowd only concerns itself with finding villains. So rather than finding allies who want the things they want, they take white nationalists and twist them into heroes purely for what they stand against. And if you're defined by what you stand against, you don't really stand for anything. The shirt actually says figs. 3 Arrows is an Antifa YouTuber. Black Pigeon Speaks is a moderate centrist. It's all in the framing.
Electronic wuss, let's go smoke some purple kush. Prepubescent girls think I'm so deep. My sitting posture is really bad. Holy crap, here comes my dad.
Hey, you get out of my room!